Finally, the tier list for the best and worst tanks in the game right now. And though the top 3 are really strong, not only can they be outclassed on a lot of maps, but each one has a counter. Not only as another tank, but as DPS and supports as well. Let's take a look, starting from the bottom as always, at the ranking of tanks in Season 6.5. With one tank in the game, you can dominate lobbies on your own, but also get countered by enemy team comps and even just one hero swap. Check out the link in the description below to get a GameLeap membership to access guides on every role to learn to master the top tanks, utilize the strength of some of the weaker ones, and on DPS and support, how to handle and counterplay the entire enemy team. At no big surprise to anyone, Roadhog is at the bottom of the barrel, but he's still not quite dead in the water. Even though it's a bit suspicious, the rank 1 tank in Europe at the start of the season and currently rank 3 is Black Swords, who's only played Roadhog to achieve it. With a 91% win rate, no matter how much foul play has been involved, like win trading and min-maxing, winning this much in a season with a high pick rate of Orisa means Roadhog can still get work done. Hog still has advantages over other tanks. Dive tanks including D.Va struggle to match the Roadhog in the front line, so on flatter maps with little high ground, he has plenty of favorable situations to take advantage of. And his heal is still strong to sustain himself in the front line. But that's about it. Because there's only one tank on each team, they need to be able to either engage with a dive or push the frontline up. And Hog is massively outclassed by almost every other frontline tank. Flanking isn't a good option anymore, which is the one thing he does better than other tanks. He's quite oppressive, so it's not the worst that he is the worst, but having an unplayable hero on a critical role like tank isn't good for the game at all. In C tier is another hero who's been struggling since Overwatch 2's release, and that's Wrecking Ball. He's had some success, and he's gotten good changes over the past couple months to help him dive more often, and even frontline a little bit with his increased reload speed outside of his ball form. He obviously can't compete with the actual frontline tanks, but it's something. The reason he's been struggling, without even considering that Bastion and Torb absolutely melt him, is that even compared to other dive tanks, he's not fast enough, nor is his dive super effective. Other dive tanks have ways to block healing, but Ball only has burst damage, which isn't so great when there's a lot of burst healing in the game right now. Without a way to block it, the only one dying to re-engage is poor little Hammy. He's gotten better over time for sure, so it's more about nerfs to other heroes that need to happen to make both Ball and other struggling characters like him more playable. Despite being better at diving, Winston is also in C tier. I'm a massive Winston fan, and he's still playable in high ranks, but it's much easier and less punishing to play a bunker type comp instead. Even on dive maps, playing static heavy damage heroes can get the best of him, especially if you don't have a lot of experience. And it's really difficult to get better at Winston when your opponents can just pick one point and click hero and laser you down when you jump in. Playing patient and precise is key, but you can get way more value by playing lots of other tanks, and you don't even have to dumb yourself down for it. Remember that he's still quite good in Zarya, who's higher up in the tier list, so as a counter pick, he can still work. Just make sure to bait out some bubbles first, or the rest of her team might still mow you down. Moving up to B tier, Rectangle Man Reinhardt is in a good spot. His shield HP buff has actually meant a lot when it comes to playing against the unbelievably high damage being pumped out right now, and although he can't always push aggressively and swing, he's still really good at holding corners. The fact that he can't do effective damage is pretty rough, but his ultimate is still really good against some of the top tanks right now, although he builds it slow. It's just like Sombra. If you time your ult in the key important fights, you can swing the game massively in your favor. Ryan's range is obviously a big problem, so remember to not spam your fire strikes too much, since it's really easy to outrange him, and hitting that skill shot makes a big difference when you're so close to getting a pick. Just like Wrecking Ball, he doesn't really need more buffs to make him stronger, it's just the state of the game that's really making him suffer. It feels like every role has a hero pick that can counter him, while still getting value when you're not interacting with him. Ramattra is next, Reinhardt's new rival in the classic brawl style. When it comes to the mirror, Ryan and Ram are pretty even. Both comps have their own unique win conditions and weaknesses, and it's really just a matter of which style you prefer. They're both good, but Ramattra is much better at handling pokey mid-fights, not only poking himself, but with his Nemesis form, block can soak an enormous amount of damage that's only rivaled by Matrix-type abilities like Javelin Spin and Kinetic Grasp, and Defense Matrix. However, despite having the ability to endure a lot of pressure, you don't want to be blocking the whole game. A big way to counterplay Ramattra is to just have one of your DPS shooting his block, stopping him from punching, and letting the rest of your team either surround him or focus somebody else. His Omnic form is good, but if you're not able to close out the fight with your punches, there are way better options if you want a tank who can spam from afar. And speaking of spamming from afar, moving on to A tier, our first hero is Sigma. And Sigma is in a bit of a weird spot. He's quite bad against some of the heroes below him in the tier list, being ignored by Winston or faced with a massive shield from Reinhardt. But against the more spammy frontliners above in the tier list, he's got a favorable matchup almost all the time. Sigma is all about pressure with his hyperspheres, and using his shield to transition seamlessly between aggressive and defensive angles. But when he has to meet another tank in the front line that's not another Sigma, he'll often struggle a bit. The good thing is that a lot of good tanks right now can't block his rock, so with good timing, you can still contest an aggressive push. Sigma's damage and damage absorption fit in really nicely with the meta, but he just simply can't compete with any type of brawl. Any successful engage onto a Sigma is pretty sure to kill him, no matter how much peel he gets. Map pool wise, he's still got good options for long sightlines outside of Circuit Royale and Havana. Wherever you've got 20-meter sightlines, you can make him work. and even work well at that. Next up is Doomfist, who's been a bit iffy up until now. It's crazy how 1 second reduction on a slam has made him a lot more fluid, and it also makes up for his rocket punch cooldown nerf a while back, where it went from 3 seconds to 4. Although as a dive tank like Ball, he doesn't have any heal blocking potential, both his normal and empowered punch have a lot of isolating potential, and unlike Ball, has multiple AoE abilities to follow up on his own engage. And thanks to the block changes to both him and Ramatra, stuck damage like Echo's Sticky Bombs and Tracer's Pulse Bomb help to build his empowered punch. Against a lot of matchups, you'll be charged up a lot more often. And a 3-man punch on the backline into a slam combined with any sort of help from your team is almost guaranteed to win you the fight. Although he himself is weakened to stuns and displacement abilities, he's got his own punch to compete with them. And out of the 5 tank heroes with stuns, he's got one of the fastest and the most unblockable. With just enough frontline pressure to trade blows with some of the heavy hitters, he's definitely an A-tier champ. And rounding out the A-tier is D.Va, who will always be good in spam meta. D.Va is the #1 pick for dive maps, where the flatland static tanks finally have to actually rotate instead of just holding overpowered positions. Maps mean a lot, and even though she doesn't fit into the top meta comps right now, her mobility, defense matrix, and burst damage are still a massive boon for switching things up a bit and getting an advantage on your meta slave opponents. The only thing stopping her from being an S-tier is realistically that she almost always needs an Ana to truly reach her maximum potential. Ana is key to helping D.Va rotate around the map while staying safe herself, and D.Va's peel potential is just what Ana needs. D.Va's still a good character otherwise, but even with her defense matrix, she takes a lot of damage when being aggressive. You can't matrix and shoot at the same time, of course, and in a meta with a lot of damage-heavy supports, it's best to not force them to heal you all the time by taking unnecessary damage. All in all, she's received some good buffs recently, making her the undisputed best dive tank across all matchups. But the S-tier is definitely leagues above the others, and in the top 3, just struggling a bit against the other 2, is Zarya. Zarya is back with a heavy-hitting projected bubble, and unless you're playing against Lucio, can easily build good charge without being punished. A lot of good DPS can utilize her bubble. Even though Reaper is still horrible, Genji for aggressive engages and Bastion for defensive peel are perfect targets in the current meta. As long as you bubble the Bastion a little after he starts his form, not only will he be able to keep going for longer, but you will almost guarantee to get maximum charge. And on allies, because of the increased HP on the bubble, you not only get the benefit of the lower cooldown, but get 5 more energy if the bubble is destroyed compared to your self bubble. Zarya herself does struggle a bit against the truly crazy burst that's in this meta, but playing patiently rewards her with enough damage to bite back. Despite a lot of damage flying, the top 2 tanks above her don't feed her energy so easily, meaning in non-spam matchups, she's actually a lot worse. And so the second best spot goes to Queen, who despite seeming worse than Zarya, has way more pressure with her shout than Zarya can handle. In 2 mirror comps, a shout versus 2 bubbles will win out every time, especially when combined with any other speed boost. Queen started off being played because of her shout, but even after it's been nerfed, it's still the ultimate go button for your team. So it's just up to you to time it right once per fight. And even though her rampage can be cleansed in multiple different ways, commanding shout is such a strong cooldown that it's easily used to force those abilities so you can capitalize with your massive anti-heal. Her neutral with her scattergun is better than Zarya's whenever she doesn't have high charge. So if you make sure to not personally charge her bubbles, you can force her back and punish with an aggressive shout into slash, preferably on the enemy backline. As a shotgun tank, she outdamages a lot of her competitors, which is especially good against dive tanks. Her only real weakness is getting spun and speared by the #1 S-tier tank, Orisa. And here she is, at the top of the tier list, and for good reason. Her heat mechanic is perfect for playing into Zarya, and realistically, you'll be feeding her the least charge on your team, unless you have a Brig Mercy backline. But she still has the potential to break bubbles when she needs to, following up with a spear to secure a kill. And against the #2, Queen, all 3 of her basic abilities counter Queen's axe, by blocking it with spin, stunning it with spear, or having not only the initial damage, but the bleed damage as well with your fortify. Bleed healing is based off of the damage Queen does, so taking half of the damage means she'll get half of the healing. Orisa is really strong at countering enemy tanks, but struggles to secure kills on backline as well as the other tanks. Fortunately, building your Terra Surge by ruthlessly fighting to take space means you can mark any 200 HP character for death, even some of those with mobility cooldowns. The fact is, Orisa is still really strong, both as an insurmountable wall of defense and as an unstoppable force running in to plant a nuke in your backline. She's not as good on dive maps, but while she can't aggressively push backline, she can for sure easily peel off divers, especially tanks. Both her spear and spin are perfect tools to disrupt a dive, and as long as Orisa is this hard to force out of position, the only thing that can beat her without playing a similar comp is a dive comp. And with enough awareness, Orisa splits the dive in half, crippling the engage. She's really a monster, so let's hope that she gets adjusted to maybe make her gameplay faster and dynamic instead of her hunker down and bunker up style that she's so good at today. As always, let me know what you think in the comments below. Maybe a hot take like frontline Ball being the best space holder in the game. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.